Hi, hello, and welcome back to today's episode of Bercerita, supported by the Reform Initiatives. My name is Lukman Hakim, and I will be hosting for today's program, where we will talk about investigative journalism and the importance of storytelling in sensitive topics. And joined by Miss Che. Hi, Miss Che. Hi, Che.
Hi, can you hear
Can you
me?
hear me? Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, great, great. Hi, good
Okay.
evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining in.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be invited by old friends from Jakarta.
Yeah, so it's 8 p.m. right now over there, so I hope it's not too late.
It's not my bedtime yet. I think, well, I'm a night person, so this is really very early for me. I'm just
Yeah,
getting started.
okay. Thank you very much, Che. So I would like to make the introduction before for Miss Che. Okay, we now have Miss Che de los Reyes. She is coming from the Philippines, and Che will share about her experiences, knowledge, and perspective on investigative journalism. She has many experiences in providing research support and data analysis for ABS-CBN's TV, radio, and online news platform in the Philippines. This is a major channel in the Philippines. Now, for today's 65th edition of Bercerita, we will have her talking about us, about her journey, about also about her experience in performing investigative journalism. So now, before joining ABS-CBN, she was also worked at Business World and also with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. Now, you probably didn't know this. But ABS-CBN News, which is the largest broadcast network in the Philippines, was actually shut down last year in 2020. So what happened? It created a shock and international attention. What happened at the time, and how are they managing right now? Well, we can also speak to Che about the situation as well. So, Che, thank you very much for joining our episode of Bercerita. Bercerita means storytelling. So, first of all, I wanted to ask, how are you? Because this is during the COVID time, and it is very that this time right now in everywhere in the world is very unsure right now. Has the vaccination started to be rolled out in the Philippines?
Yes, actually, the target of the government is to vaccinate 70 million, 70% of the population by year end. But I'm not sure if they'll achieve that target. I think Indonesia is way, way ahead of us in terms of vaccination. We just started in March, this March. So we're just, how many months? 6, 7 months into our vaccination program. So we have a long way to go. And the cases here right now, especially in the capital, Metro Manila, where I am now, it's they say it's still to reach its peak. We have about 16,000 to 20,000 cases, confirmed cases a day. And that's not taking into account those who are not tested, you know. So it's really, the pandemic is very much here. We're still on lockdown.
I see. So, in Indonesia, people, since they are in lockdown, people are starting to dabble in house plants. Are the trends also happening as well over there?
Yeah, there was what they call a pandemic especially last year at the height of the pandemic, of the lockdowns. But now it's beginning to die down, to wane. I myself has a small has dabbled into houseplants, but we've had that business way before the pandemic. So it was just a lucky for us to have that side business that boomed during the pandemic, I guess. It's a great way to keep yourself sane during these
Yes, especially
uncertain
during
times, you know.
lockdown.
It's a
Sticking with
great
the
stress
plants.
reliever.
Yes. Well, okay, audience, if you have questions for Che, you can type them out in the chat box and I'll read them at the end of this program. Nah, untuk para pemirsa, tema kali ini adalah tentang jurnalisme investigatif atau investigative journalism dan bagaimana kita bercerita untuk menarik perhatian penonton tentang kasus-kasus sensitif seperti korupsi atau narkoba. Nah, untuk kalian yang mau bertanya ke Ibu C, ini yang sekarang sedang kita akan wawancara, pertanyaannya bisa ditulis di kolom chat box pakai bahasa Indonesia juga nggak apa-apa ya, nanti saya terjemahkan ke Ibu C di akhir program ini. Okay, Che, my first question to Ms. Che is about getting to know you better. Tell us about the time you started to be interested in journalism. Your profile said you also study in journalism as well, and seems to all your career is working on journalism. Is it something that you have always wanted to pursue?
Well, actually, I've started not as a journalist. I've started as a development worker. I've worked half of my professional career, half of my professional life, I was a development worker. But, you know, there's a common principle underpinning these two professions, if I may say so. As a development worker, I was working with the grassroots, and then later on, I transitioned to advocacy work, policy promoting or advancing human development policies in the Philippines. And in this, right there, back then, as today, I love telling stories. I really love communicating with people, getting to know their situation, and telling their stories, putting them out there. The principle, I think, both as a journalist and back then as a development worker for me is really sort of being a representative of the marginalized. As cliche as it may sound, it's like giving a voice to the voiceless. That's what they always say with journalism, right? And it was true then, as it is now, when I was a development worker, and now that I'm a journalist. It's not really a sharp transition. It was really not a sharp transition for me, or a sudden transition for me. It's not very different, the principles that I uphold and the thing that I love to do. And of course, I love writing. So it was really a natural transition. I was already working with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism and then with ABS-CBN before I started to pursue an MA in journalism. So I was a development worker and a journalist, and I believe that I'm still a development worker. I think it's a lifelong vocation. It never stops.
Okay. Yeah, and it is actually quite similar, the job when you're telling a story in journalism. But the big difference in your career is that you have been working in storytelling for development organization like PCIG, and I think you also mentioned another organization as well. But how do you think creating stories from investigative journalism, not journalism per se, but just a storytelling in general, for a non-profit media organization could differ with such a big media company like ABS-CBN? I mean, they have more resources, but obviously they have also some sort of a limitation that's different compared to non-profit organizations. So how is it different?
Well, that's true. When I was with the PCIJ, that's the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, it's a small non-profit media organization that specializes in investigative journalism, as the name says. And now I'm working with one of the biggest media, corporate media in the Philippines, ABS-CBN. I'd like to emphasize that the principles of journalism is the same with both the small nonprofit, PCIJ, and for a corporate media like ABS-CBN. We pursue the same, we stand by the same principles of fairness and accuracy in all the stories that we do. So that has to be clear. But I think that the main difference is that if you're with a nonprofit and a smaller organization that specializes in investigative journalism, then you are more focused. You have more time to spend, more resources to spend for investigative work. So it's quite ironic, right? That a smaller organization has more resources to spend for investigative journalism than a bigger network that you expect to be to have more resources, right? But the thing with the media, a bigger media company, is that you have regular programming that competes for time and resources and manpower and focus. So for us, for example, we are a small investigative group within a big news organization. So we also there are also demands from us from the daily newscasts and for special coverages apart from investigative reporting. So there are competing demands for your time and attention because you're expected to churn out stories regularly to service your multi-platform. There's TV, there's online, and we also have radio. So all those things compete for resources, manpower, and focus, whereas a smaller nonprofit organization is more focused on producing investigative work. I think this is a common problem even for big media companies elsewhere, even in the US or in Europe. I hear this a lot with corporate media. There's less resources for investigative work because it takes time. It really takes a long time to produce a good investigative piece of journalism. So some media companies don't have the luxury of letting, a team work on a single project for a long time, right? Because they need these people also to service their regular programs. So I think that's the main difference.
How long
that's
does
why
it
you
take
see
usually?
There's I'm sorry, I just have to add that that's why it's not often you see big corporate media organizations produce investigative reports that often. It's not that often, except of course the real giants like the New York Times or the Washington Post. These are the giants, so they really have a lot of resources and a lot of people, skilled people, to produce investigative reports. But for example, for national media organizations, I don't know in Indonesia if that's also the case. It's not often that corporate media, mainstream media companies produce investigative reports in long form. How long do you produce an investigative report? There's not a set time frame. Actually, it depends on how complicated the story is. But it sometimes takes a few weeks to months, especially if you're working with big data and that you have to interview so many sources. Could take months, and that's a lot of resources if you're a corporate media.
So I just wanted to know regarding on the process of investigation itself between nonprofit and large corporate. Is it easier when you're working with ABS-CBN? I mean, they're a large news. So, for example, I imagine when you're approaching a source person and you say you came from ABS-CBN, they will say, "Oh, okay, it's a big network, so they're willing to be more open about it compared to, for example, a nonprofit in PCIG, where, well, not a lot of people usually know about nonprofit organization. Is it how in the process of investigative itself, is it different? Is it easier, or is it actually much more difficult because because it's big and they're more hesitate to speaking to you?
Yeah, actually, it's sometimes it works to our advantage that our network is known. So if we introduce ourselves, we don't have to explain what we do and what we stand for, because people are already familiar with us. But sometimes you're correct, because we have a lot of viewers. Some sources are really very, very careful and hesitant to be interviewed. Sometimes we encounter that we don't even have a camera, and we're just, just asking for information, not really an interview, not really for interview purposes, but only for the purpose of clarification. And then we hear a source, we encounter this often. A source would say, "Oh, are you recording me? Is this for interview? I might see myself. I don't want to see myself on national TV this evening. My boss will scold me," like that. They're sometimes really hesitant. But yeah, often it works to our advantage because they already know us.
Okay, so can you tell us about the steps in producing an investigative journalism? I figured it's going to be like a lot of steps, especially for a special report which requires a huge amount of research going on. So, and how do you ensure that the story that you are getting at is based on fact and honest? I mean, because you have a team and you have members of the team, and you probably told them, okay, you interview a certain person, or you probably search for certain data. And how do you make those checks and balances about the facts that you found while you're doing the investigation?
Well, doing an investigative work, you're correct. We do a lot of research. We churn a lot of data. I think there are safeguards to make sure that the document that you're holding, for example, is a true document. It's not a fake document. It's always to get your documents from independently. What do I mean by that? With investigative journalists, as if people already know you, or your organization, or you as a reporter is known to be an investigative journalist, or your organization is known to be an investigative journalism organization, people will approach you. Whistleblowers will approach you. They will feed you documents. They will tell you things, that there's an anomaly in this bidding process that we encountered, something like that. Or I know there are whistleblowers that will come to you and say that they know that there's corruption that happened in this agency. So what will safeguard you? These sources all have an agenda, right? So it's better if you will confirm the information that you got independently. So you never believe a source, whether it's a person or it's a document, 100%. You should always go get the documents yourself. You will always strive to get the document yourself independently, and you will talk to other sources that apart from the whistleblower. That being said, you always the problem with documents is that you have to access to information is one problem, but that's the thing. The harder a document is to get, the more you should doubt the authenticity of the document that is being handed to you, on a silver platter. So there. And always get primary documents. You don't just get documents uploaded on the web, right? You don't just get published documents. You always get from official sources. So get straight to the source. If it was an audit report, go to the audit agency and ask for that document. You just don't search the web and download it from wherever, because documents can be faked. So there. And always, always, the principle here is that you always go and interview the subject, your subject. So if it's a person or an agency you're accusing of wrongdoing, of corruption, you will exert all effort to get the side of that person or that agency or organization that you're accusing of wrongdoing. That is fairness. And it's not like calling them or texting them, and then if they don't reply, you're just writing your report that we attempted to get the side of this and that person, but we didn't get any report. That's not enough. You should exert all effort, even if it takes a long time. You should exert all effort to get the side of that person or that organization.
So
that's the most important thing.
So how about information that's usually not available to the public? You said that you have to get information that's sort of like official, but sometimes official informations are usually not available either online or publicly, or even probably the officials or person from the organization or companies are not willing to hand it over the information. And how do you approach that?
Okay, so let's say you got this top secret document handed to you by a whistleblower, right? So you, for example, and then you go to the agency or the department or the ministry that's supposed to have that document, and they do, and of course they won't give it to you because it's top secret, it's official. So how do you deal with that? There are ways of dealing with that. You ask an official of that agency to verify the document if it's correct or not. You integrate it in the interview, because as I've said, you always interview the agency or the person you're accusing of wrongdoing. So you show that document that you got from your source. Of course, you will never disclose your source, right? Even if you're forced to. Well, in the Philippines, we're protected by law. Journalists are protected by law to not disclose. They don't have to disclose their source. So at least we have that. So you show it as part of the interview. You show it to the person, and then you ask if they can confirm it or not. If they can confirm the veracity of that document or not. But you cannot just take it, if you don't have any other copy than just the one handed to you by your whistleblower, you cannot really take that as gospel truth. There will always be doubt on the authenticity of that document if you cannot verify it elsewhere.
Okay, well, that's a very intriguing. It's quite a scary, I guess, if sometimes you're working on a very sensitive information-sensitive documents. Is there possible that, for example, you don't always release all information available to documents, like for sensitive issues, like for example in defense? So do you also have that kind of safeguards as well? Like you don't release all the information, or you basically have to release all the information regardless of the consequences? This is actually something. This is actually something that was.
It's a debatable, it's a sensitive and debatable topic. Yeah. Well, me personally, as a journalist, I abide by the principle of doing no harm. Above all, do no harm. So you always weigh the story carefully. If it will do more harm, public harm than good. So there's always public. So it's always you weigh a story by means of by thinking about, will this benefit the public? Will this benefit the greater good? And with that in mind, that principle will guide you. That will guide me. If I have this information that will put people in peril, in danger, if I run with it, then I won't. So but it's not black and white, you know. It's easy to talk about theoretically, like here in this interview, but when you're faced with that decision, and many journalists are faced with that decision every day, it's really a difficult thing to process. If you run with a story and there's potential harm that it will bring to some people, the prudent thing to do is not to decide on it alone. So that's why you have your newsroom. That's why you have your editor. You have your colleagues. So you always consult, and it should be an editorial decision by the newsroom. Or, even if it's very sensitive, then it's an editorial decision between you and your editors, by a small group of people. You never decide on it alone as a journalist.
Okay. So thank you very much. So I just want to remind our audience who are just joining right now. We are now live with Ms. Reyes. She is the head of the research at ABS-CBN News. We are talking about investigative journalism. And if you have something to ask with Che, you can also ask them in the chat box, and I'll read it to you by the end of the program. Jadi untuk para pemirsa yang baru bergabung, tema kali ini adalah tentang jurnalisme investigatif. Kalau misalkan ada pertanyaan untuk Bu C, bisa ditulis di kolom chat box. Nanti saya terjemahkan dan tanyakan di akhir program. So, C, the next question is that when I research on ABS-CBN, apparently last year and also this year as well, they have won a lot of awards about the coverage on the impact of Duterte's administration program to, is it called the war on drugs like they do in Indonesia?
Yeah, it's called the war on drugs, yes.
Yeah. So now ABS-CBN News apparently won a lot of awards, and I also saw some of the special reports as well, and they're actually very good. It's very engaging. So I wanted to ask about the experience in developing a special report about the impacts of this war on drugs, because it's a very sensitive topic, because drugs is something that obviously everyone, it's quite debatable about its effect right now, even in Indonesia itself. But having a very severe consequences, especially those not always in they're not being tried fairly according to the law, is also very controversial. So how do you make a special report on such a sensitive and very controversial topics like this?
Well, I think our team was the first to do an investigative story about the President Duterte's war on drugs. He was elected in 2016. He assumed office in middle of 2016, and we came out with a report. I think it was around October 2016. So the moment he won the elections, so even if he hasn't yet assumed office, we already noticed that every day there were reports about drug pushers, or so-called alleged drug pushers or drug users being killed in the streets. And the numbers were escalating as the months progressed, because even in the campaign, he already declared that he will eliminate drugs in the Philippines. You know, it's one of his campaign promises. So at first we were monitoring news reports, and we were counting the deaths, the drug-related deaths, and we came up with this infographics. It's an interactive infographics about who the victims were, their demographic. We wanted to document the killings that was that were happening every night at first. So it started like that. When it hit the killings, the number of those killed hit 1,000, we said we should put a face behind these numbers. These were people being killed every night. These were, they had families, you know, they were Filipinos being killed. They weren't just numbers. So that was when we decided to go to these to their homes, and we interviewed their relatives, the eyewitnesses, neighbors, on what really happened. And then, remember, I was telling you, always go to the primary documents. The primary documents here being the police reports. So we gathered police reports about these killings. Here we call it spot reports. So the police were required to make a report about the incident and file it the same day of the killing, or if the victim was found, you know, in the streets dead, they were also required to file a report. So we got those and we compared them with what the victims, the families of the victims were saying. So we formed this narrative because there were a lot of similarities around the circumstances by which these alleged drug pushers and drug dealers were killed. And there were a lot of similarities also as how the eyewitnesses and families were telling them. So what was the picture that came that we saw? The police were saying that they all fought back. That was why they were forced to kill these suspects, these drug suspects. That they just wanted to arrest them, but they fought back. So they
Okay, we seem to have a slight technical difficulties. Lagi ada kesalahan teknis dulu, mungkin bisa kita tunggu. We're going to wait. Okay, we'll wait until Che join again.
Hello?
Hi. Hello.
Sorry, I think I got disconnected.
Yeah, that's the problem with overseas right now. Internet connection, it's always a technical thing. So, yes, well, sorry, you can continue. I think you left it at about the similarities between the report from the police and also from the testimonies from the...
So there was a picture that emerged from the police reports. That they were all, that the victims, that the police were just trying to arrest the alleged crime suspects, alleged drug pushers, that they were trying to arrest them, but then they fought back. So they started, the suspect, the alleged drug pusher or drug user started shooting a gun at them. So the police were forced to, to defend themselves. And in the process, they killed or they shot the suspected criminal. So that was the common narrative to the police reports. But when we asked the families of these suspects, they said that, number one, the suspect didn't own a gun. That was very few suspects or killed, of those killed, who the relatives admitted that they had a gun. But the vast majority, about 90%, 95%, didn't own a gun. So they were saying, how could they have shot back at the police? Or how could they have fought against the police? They were so many and it was only one. So all of them were saying that no, they didn't fight back. So that was common. That was contradicting between the two accounts, and that was common to both of them. So that put the police narrative into question. So that there were really excesses, abuses committed by the police. And actually, the head of the Philippine National Police at the time was also saying that there were, in fact, some transgressions committed by the police because they had they conducted investigations into these incidents. But the problem is they don't disclose the results to the public of their investigations and what happened to these policemen. Were they sacked? Were they are cases filed against them? You know, that's the most important thing. Or were they just transferred to another unit? There's a lot of opaqueness in that area.
Okay, so the special report, is it focusing on the testimonies and also from the victims and the victims' families, or was it focusing on the mistreatment, probably the mistreatment and maladministration in these killings? So what were the focus of that special report?
Well, the title of the special report was the war on drugs, the unheard voices. So with that title, the purpose really was to, as I said, this was the first report to delve into that tried to delve into what was really happening, to the news reports that each night that there were drug suspects that were killed by the police. So it was really, the objective was really to look at the story of those who were killed, who they were, what they were doing, what were their professions, and those whom they left behind. And the saddest thing here is that they left a lot of orphans, and they left a lot of most of them were the breadwinners in the family. They were the primary earners in the family. So with their deaths, they left family members who didn't know where they will get their food or income from.
Okay.
So that was really to let the readers or the people, the public, know that these are people. They're killing drug suspects. They're killing suspected criminals who are people with families, who are fathers, who are brothers, sons. These people.
Okay. So there's a question from Muiz Liddinilah, but we'll ask the question later on. Pak Muiz Liddinilah ya, dari nanti pertanyaannya kita tanyakan di mendekati akhir segmen. So that was some very engaging ones, and so I wanted to ask, how do you decide on delivering the special report? I mean, what was the media? The main media, how are you going to present them? Because it's a very complex one. You tell a story from the you obviously you have photographs and pictures and everything, but also you need to present data as well. So how are you delivering this? What are the media that you show on this topic?
So we at ABS-CBN, we always strive to render a story such as this multi-platform, meaning there will be text elements, of course, for online. That's still the meat of the story, but also a lot of pictures, slides, short clips. We even had animation. We had our very talented graphic artists render some of the because we wanted to piece together a pattern for these drug raids by the police. So the pattern, the modus, so to speak. So our graphic artist rendered it in animation of how these drug raids usually happen. We had infographics for the data part, and of course, ABS-CBN is mainly it has TV as one of its main platforms. So we had TV reports of it as well. But TV is, the nature of it, it's very fleeting. It's a very difficult medium for investigative reports because a special story, an investigative report on TV is just 4 to 5 minutes long, and that's already very, very long for a primetime newscast. So we had to chop it up to make it serialized. But I think the real art to it was the online report, because then you can combine a lot of elements, graphic, visual elements, text elements, data, and as I've said, animation. So it will really come alive and become engaging to the public. And of course, a lot of people are, follow the news online, on mobile even. So we had to make sure that the story is really friendly on a mobile device.
So is there a specific website where you put the special report?
Yes, it's on our main news platform. It's news.abs-cbn.com. For special reports like this, we work very, very closely with our news digital team. That's our online team, and specifically the multimedia team, because they have these great artists, great photographers, and they also have IT personnel, because for some of it, to make it really, there's coding involved to make it, the story jump right at you. So it's a big team that does it, not only us. It involves a lot of collaboration.
So we're obviously going to ask a question about the investigative journalism, and many of our viewers are also studying journalistic themselves. So when you're making this special report, when you're trying to deliver such special report, especially on the investigation side, such as this war on drugs or maybe terrorism, just sensitive topics, what do you think journalists should keep in mind when they're investigating and also reporting?
So always be mindful of your safety. There are a lot of resources online and a lot of media organizations that focus on teaching journalists about their safety. So it's very important to always be aware of your surroundings. Do not go to any place without studying the area first. So you have to know it, to study the area first. Never go to a place blind. There's this saying that no story is worth dying for, and you have to live to tell your story another day.
Do
So,
people
and it's
actually, some
true,
journalists actually do dying for the news?
but it's true. If you die, if you go to an area despite, this, with complete disregard for your safety, and you die, what purpose do you serve? You should live another day to tell another story, another day, because who will tell those stories if you die?
The story.
So yeah,
Okay.
for me, no story is worth dying for.
That's a very interesting. So your safety must come first when you're trying to investigate this kind of thing. So it's not just about war on drugs. Even doing corruption is, you have to know where you're going and everything. So before we
Yes,
ask
of
for
course,
the next
and
question,
if you're a manager, that's also your responsibility. If you're a newsroom, that's also your collective responsibility to train your people and always caution them not to go anywhere that they don't feel safe, and you don't force people in your team to go or do a story if they're not comfortable doing it.
I
It's
see.
it's 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 a collective responsibility of the newsroom to ensure that their journalists are safe and protected.
Now that's a very important thing for the managers themselves. Okay, so before we start the next question, there is someone from the chat box, Al Muizid. So his question is in Indonesia. I'll translate for you. So the Philippines is known as an authoritarian country, authoritarian state. Now that's that's something new that's debatable probably, or probably we can confirm. Has there been any bad experience when performing this investigation? Probably not just about the war on drugs, but has there been also about something else, someone else, but another report?
Okay. First of all, as far as I know, we're still a democracy. So we're even if it sometimes feel like we're under an authoritarian rule. Officially, we're still a democracy. So I'd like to believe that our branches of government are still functioning, and there are still checks and balances. Um, but whether even in a democracy, there's always a danger to journalists if you're pursuing sensitive topics like corruption, because you're dealing with people in power. So that's always, you're ruffling feathers, you're rocking the boat. So
So
you're
has there been
always,
any real experience about it then?
if we, yes,
A real experience.
yes. And it's not, these experiences, the dangers is not always, if you're investigating someone with a high position. It doesn't, sometimes it's more dangerous to go local. It's more dangerous for local journalists if they're doing a story on the ground with the local police, for example, or the local drug lords or the local warlords. It's more dangerous than dealing with national politicians, for example. It's because for local journalists, for community journalists, it's they know where you live. You live in a very small community, in a very small space, and everyone knows each other. So it's more difficult for them. For us, yes. One example is that when we were doing that war on drugs story, so we went to this area where there was where one of the victims lived. So it was really in the slums. I think all of them, I think 98% of them were really from the poorer sectors of society, the ones who were killed. We didn't find one victim who was even in the middle class. They were always in the lower income classes. So we went to the slums, and then after that, I told you earlier, we would go to the police station to get the primary documents, the official report of the police, right? So after going to the house of the victim, of the one who was killed, the alleged suspect, we went to the police station to try to request the police report. And then there was this police agent who was speaking to us and saying, okay, this is the police report. And so what did they tell you? And then we said, what do you mean? What did they tell you there? Did you just come from this and that area because you were interviewing the families of these victims?
Oh.
So it was like a threat, you know, that they were following us, or that they were aware where we were going. So those kinds of things. That's why I always emphasize that you should always be aware of your surroundings, even if you don't see people, even if it's an unfamiliar area, even if you don't see people, you know, whether they look like police or they look like criminal elements, it doesn't mean that you're not being followed. So that was a wake-up call for us.
So what did you do at the time after being threatened like that?
We just we asked for the name of that police agent, but also this is one more tip. We always communicated with our base, with our home base, with our HQ. So always let people from your newsroom know of your whereabouts. So that's a very important thing to do. It's very simple, it's very basic, but it's important. So every time we would go from one place to the next, we would text or call our editors to say, well, we just finished this and we're about to go here. So always do that. Always wear your ID. Always let them know that you're from a media organization, so they won't suspect you. They won't suspect that you're, you know, pretending to be someone you're not. And always let them know. Always let them know that there are people from your office who know where you are and that you're talking to him right now. You know, there's subtle ways of knowing that.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So probably using that's very interesting. Now, I think in the past, if you're doing that, it's very difficult for people to know where you are. But right now, you have a cell phone, and
Right now, it's very easy.
It's very easy. So there's also another question now from Magfur Munif. So he asks, is it possible to apply investigative journalism for education cases like corruptions in school or the political impact in teaching, and how to do that?
Yes, of course. The principles of investigative journalism is actually, how do I say this? It's similar to academic research, in that you're not satisfied with one or two sources. You really go from one source to the next and corroborate and find more sources. So yeah, you can apply it. You can apply the principles of investigative journalism to I think almost any issue. There's no limit. What's
Has there been
the main difference? Probably.
Any report on education, probably? Probably you can make an example about what kind of report in the Philippines about education. Has there been any like high profile?
There have been a lot of reports. I think if I remember it correctly, PCIJ did a lot of reports on education before, corruption in education. Here in the Philippines, there's always an issue about textbooks that the government buys for its public schools. There's always, you know, textbooks. These are, you know, mass bulk procurement, right? Bulk purchases. So it involves a lot of money. So there's always an issue with that, because there's always something wrong with the books. And then that makes you wonder who manufactures these books, and why did they, why did they pass the standards? Who approved them? If they had so many historical inaccuracies, for example, or English textbooks that have a lot of grammatical errors, so there's always potential corruption story there in education. But also, there's also stories about appointing teachers for public posts here in the Philippines. That there's always an issue about positions for sale. Those things.
And positions in local agencies or in education or at headmasters.
Teaching positions for sale, because it's difficult to be to have a permanent teaching job in government here. They say it's really a difficult process, and there's a lot of requirements. So we've heard reports in certain areas where they sell these teaching positions to people who are not that qualified to teach. So there's a lot of potential investigative stories on education, in the education sector.
Yeah, so this is interesting because in Indonesia, there are similar things like that as well. But I think one of the things that I was sort of like wondering, the war on drugs is something systematic. Corruption is also systematic cases as well. So, for example, one cases of corruption, for example, in one ministry, you can have like a special report for a very long time. The campaign could be for a long time, for example, a month. In education sector, sometimes it's not systematic. So it's sort of like occurring in one over there and one over there, but it's systematic as in a sense that it's not really made to corrupt, like people just doing the corruption themselves. The initiatives came independently. So I was wondering, can you also make a special report on something that was not systematic like that? Like the war on drugs is systematic, as in there are particular sides or parties that was making it happen just as corruption. But in education sector, it's not like that. It's just like a bunch of people from different localities independently doing the corruption. So how do you decide that? And
so
what is going to be featured?
As long as there's public interest involved, of course you should do that. I think it's not about the scale. That it's, for example, that there's corruption at the national level or large-scale corruption, that it's worthy of an investigative report, versus there's this local government, that there's something there happening, that one is more worthy of an investigative report than the other. No, I would like to see it not in terms of scale or in terms of whether it's systematic or it's just happening at this time, that it's perpetrated only by a small bunch of people. I think what's the more important measure of whether an issue is worthy of pursuing, of investigating, is the public, how big a public interest there lies in that issue. It could be a small town story or an issue, but a lot of people in that town is affected by that issue.
Yeah,
it's always public interest.
Perhaps the younger journalists could start from something like that, or something that interests the public. Maybe young journalists should not just immediately go to something dangerous, but perhaps in something which is more safe.
Could be an issue happening in their own community,
Yeah.
or in their university. If you're a campus paper, if you're a university or school paper, could be an issue in your own campus. Could be an issue affecting students.
Okay, thank you, Che. So I think there's no more question. So before we started this interview, I told the viewers that ABS-CBN in last year was being shut down. So, and Che, what is actually happening? Because when I remember last year when it was being shut down, it was making quite a huge headline. Even in Indonesia, I think there were also statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well about this. So can you tell us about when the government is shutting down, right? The ABS-CBN news. It's not just the police or the authorities or the judiciary, but it's the government doing it. So can you tell us about what is exactly happening at the time?
Okay. The issue is that in the Philippines, I'm not sure about Indonesia, but here in the Philippines, before a network, a TV or a broadcast network, even radio, can operate, we need a franchise from Congress, from the legislature. So that's called the franchise to operate. It's a law that should be approved by Congress. So ABS-CBN, like other networks, was granted the franchise to operate, to air its programs. So that franchise lapsed last year. It was a 25-year franchise. So before the franchise, long before the franchise was set to lapse, it was already filed before Congress that to be renewed. So there was this franchise renewal bill. Unfortunately, even before, when Duterte was, when the president was assumed office, he made it no secret that he was always mentioning it in his speeches that he will shut ABS-CBN down, that he was mad at ABS-CBN because he was accusing the network of not airing his political ads during the campaign season. So that was the issue. So it was really him being mad at the network for not airing his political ads, his campaign advertisements. So that was a message really to Congress, that the Congress was composed of his allies. So the congressmen did not, because they were the majority, right? So they didn't approve, they rejected the bill that was supposed to renew the franchise granted to ABS-CBN. So without that franchise, when that franchise lapsed, we were forced to shut down. So that was what happened there. But ABS-CBN's franchise was not renewed. But meanwhile, a lot of franchises for other networks, other telecommunications networks, TV networks, radio networks, were approved without, without dialogue, without consultation. They were just approved. As it was really, in the past, franchise approval of networks weren't really that much of an issue until this, because it was the president who was angry with a network. So, it was really political. It was really very political. It was a political move. So what happened there was, you were mentioning what the impact is. Right now, we were forced to shut down our provincial TV and radio stations And right now we're operating on cable, but also we have beefed up our digital channels. On YouTube, we have, let me just pull up. It was really, we were really in the process. Long before this, we were really we were already in the process of our pivot to digital, because you know that's why they call TV, radio, and print the legacy media, and digital the new media, because it's you know the global population is already accessing information on digital, on mobile. So that was all the more impetus for us to beef up our digital channels. Right now we have ABS-CBN News has 12.8 million subscribers on YouTube, and that's news alone. We also have our entertainment arm. And the entertainment arm has 36 million subscribers on YouTube alone. On Facebook, ABS-CBN News has 22 million followers. But the sad thing is, for the Philippines is an archipelago like Indonesia, right? We're composed of thousands of islands. In many parts of the country, there's no internet. There's still no internet access. And in many parts of the country, in many provinces, they only have ABS-CBN stations, the local stations, as their source of news. So when ABS-CBN shut down, those people don't have any more source of news. It's true, there was this typhoon, a big typhoon last year, and we had many accounts of people saying that they weren't prepared for the typhoon because there was no source of information in their area. There was no radio, there was no TV. It really, our shutdown really left a big information gap in many parts for many Filipinos. Not only that, not only news, but also entertainment. Our entertainment is really, really a big arm of the network. And even mental health practitioners were saying that it was very important, the entertainment part, our what do you call this, our soap operas, our movies, our films, our entertainment programs are very much needed in the time of the pandemic, when people were on lockdown, where there were uncertainty, a lot of people having mental issues, being depressed, having anxiety. That entertainment, our entertainment programs provided a sort of escape for them. So that was also not to be discounted. It's not only news, but also entertainment that was that Filipinos were deprived of when we were shut down.
Wow, that's I cannot imagine how it feels when you're sort of like in the office suddenly hearing that that suddenly your office is, your broadcast channel network is going to be shut down. How was everyone's feeling at the time? Was it kind of scary? Or,
it was really very emotional. Many of our people were with the company for 20 years, 25 years. They've dedicated their entire lives. They've met their spouses here in the office. They've made friends. People are family, and it's their source of livelihood. With the shutdown, we had to let go of thousands of personnel during the time of during a pandemic, when the economy is really in tatters. There's, you know, very little job opportunity, and they were suddenly jobless. It's really
and how are they coping? Really, how are you coping now? Is it you're transforming to digital? So how is it going right now for now?
Well, we had a lot of followers, but of course, digital is still, you know, if you talk about it on the from a business point of view, simply put, it doesn't earn as much as from advertising in the traditional media, on TV and on radio, because you know the problem. and this is an ongoing discussion worldwide. The problem with news production on the internet, is that it's not really the producers of content, the producers of news who earn, but the tech companies, the platforms. Example, but the advertising really doesn't go 100% to us. It goes, it's the platform that earns, not the producer.
Yeah.
That's why there's this issue with Australia, right? That they had to make a stand. Because, it costs a lot to produce good reports, news reports. And it doesn't really, the producers don't earn that much from it.
Okay. So just one last question, just for a short, you can answer this shortly. So what do you think about the future of journalism in Southeast Asia? You also spoke about your transition as well to the digital. So is it going to be the future, and how investigative journalism is going to transform in the future?
Okay. The thing with digital, with the digital, more and more people going digital, getting their news from the internet, from online, from social media. It's created this kind of what they call infodemic. It's really a deluge. So many information that you get from so many sources online that people get more confused instead of getting, with more information, you get more clarity. You're more informed. But the opposite is happening. People get with which source to trust. So in that sense, journalism will always have its place. Recent studies have shown that people are trusting the news media for reliable information on political things, for COVID-19, and they're turning to the news media, to journalists for trustworthy information, because they know that these sources have been vetted, that they've been edited, that they went through an editorial process before being fed to them, before being put out there. So it's really a promising development that people are trusting the media once again. That trust in the media is again on the rise.
Okay, that's a very good opportunity. So thank you very much, Che, for your time.
Thank you.
With Bercerita Live Talk Show. I hope you have a great time. It's been more than an hour. It's a very good conversation.
So we went on overtime. So thank you. I hope your listeners had an opportunity to get some takeaways from this conversation.
I'm sure they are. This is a very good one. It's actually fine if it gets more than an hour, because the good thing about digital is that you can always edit and trim, but also you have more time than usual. You don't have to be fixed in the specific slot. Okay, for our audience, if you're late in tuning to our show, then you don't have to worry, because this live interview has been recorded and will be posted in our beritabaru.co YouTube channel. It's beritabaru.co, and also will be in our Berita Baru podcast in audio form as well. So you can check the podcast of Berita Baru. Untuk yang terakhir lagi, kalau misalkan para pemirsa ingin menonton lagi acaranya, bisa juga melihat di channel YouTube kami di beritabaru.co, atau juga bisa lihat di podcast kami di Berita Baru dalam bentuk audio. I'll see you again next time for another edition of Bercerita. Thank you very much, Che. I hope everything is well. I hope everything.
It was a pleasure.
I hope. Have you been vaccinated yet?
Yes. Fortunately, we've been vaccinated already, fully vaccinated.
For the second time.
Yes.
Okay, that's very good. So for everyone else, stay safe and see you in the next edition of Bercerita. Thank you,
Thank
Che.
you. Good night, guys. Thanks for listening.